will control the vertical.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery, suspense, anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic. We host Mark. Today we are covering an episode of The Outer Limits. It's called The Bellero Shield. It's from season 1, episode 20. And now this is a story written by Joseph Stefano and credited with Lou Moorhelm. But it really is, I think, a piece of work mostly by Joseph Stefano. Apparently it passed through several people's hands before it got there, before it got to him, but he wasn't happy with the drafts and he did a final rewrite. It's based very loosely on a story called The Lanson Device, I think it's called, by Arthur Leo Zagat. Which is about this special shield that gets created and then tried out, an impenetrable shield that gets put around Manhattan, apparently, and unfortunately the man who invents it, Lanson, dies as it's activated, so no one knows how to deactivate it, so they have to wait for the shield to power down, which takes decades, and when it finally does, Manhattan is complete wreck because there was a fire. All the oxygen got consumed and the oxygen couldn't permeate through the barrier and to freshen it, and everyone died. So that was the basic premise. That really isn't anything much other than there's a shield or this invisible barrier that's part of this story. This story is nominally, or actually pretty much on the nose, is Joseph Stefano's take on the Lady Macbeth character. In many respects, it is Macbeth without Macbeth, as it were. Now, it stars Martin Landau as Richard Bellero, Sally Kellerman as his wife Judith Bellero, who is our Lady Macbeth character, and his father, who runs this big corporation that essentially he is making a decision about who's going to take over from him, and he passes over his son. Now, his wife is very ambitious. Judith is very ambitious, and this does not go down well. Now, give a bit of context about Outer Limits more generally. Martin Landau, Sally Kellerman and Neil Hamilton have appeared in previous episodes. Martin Landau was in The Wonderful, The Man Who Never Was. Sally Kellerman was in The Human Factor, which was episode 8 of season 1. And Neil Hamilton was in, I think, the previous episode to this, The Invisibles. So he's kind of coming straight to another episode from the last one. So it's kind of interesting they're using actors that they've used before. And you can't blame them because Martin Landau put in a fantastic performance. Sally Kellerman was very good and is extremely charismatic and is perfect for this Lady Macbeth type role. And Neil Hamilton's quite good as a sort of a more senior, offish character. He kind of did something similar in The Invisible, so it kind of works. So what happens is this man, Richard Bellero, who's doing work with a laser firing it into space, but he accidentally sort of draws down an alien. So it's similar to the pilot episode in many respects. If you remember that was like working with radio beams fired into space, which drew an alien life form. But this draws this other life form who sort of claims to come from this world that sits above our galaxy or something like that. And he's a fairly innocent and naive kind of character, trusting, and demonstrates he's got this shield that's used for them to be able to travel through space because nothing can penetrate it. But they also quickly realise it could be a shield for defence. Now, Judith sees this as an opportunity for making a lot of money and possibly getting a placement in the at the heart of her husband taking over the Bellero Foundation. Now, there is some shenanigans before this. We kind of figure that the father has not handed it over to his son, partly because of his grasping, ambitious wife. There's a touch of that to his decision. And of course, this rankles. And I think there's on the nose dialogue along those lines. I think Judith at one point says something like, Richard doesn't want to take over your corporation, he just wants your love. I want to take over your corporation. So it's kind of on the nose. Anyway, she realises what she's got, and for various manipulative means kind of manages to get herself alone with the alien. So she's trying to get it to hand over the device that generates the shield. There's an interesting subtext or sort of side issue here of another character called Mrs. Dame, the housekeeper, who's a woman who dresses in black and is almost like a sidekick, a willing participant with Mrs. Bellero in what's going on. She will do anything she's told, pretty much. So there's a weird, possibly lesbian sort of subtext there going on. Now, I looked into this, and Joseph Stefano said he was kind of influenced by Les Diaboliques and the women in that, and you can kind of see it. One thing I will say about this episode is it's one of the best looking Outer Limits episodes there is, and there's a lot of good looking Outer Limits episodes, but this one is outstanding. The black and white photography, cinematography is terrific. I mean, really good, really, really outstanding. And directed by John Brahm, who I think did a few other episodes. Cinematography by Conrad Hall, does a lot of the best Outer Limits sort of episodes, but this in particular, the composition of the shots and so on is quite outstanding. It reminds me a little of the kind of softened Hollywood version of German expressionism you saw in some of the 30s horror films, such as Son of Frankenstein, in that it isn't full expressionism, but there's a sort of there's an intensity to the images and the sort of framing that really works, and it was really good. It has to be said. Anyway, the story goes on. She manages to cajole the alien. No, she doesn't manage to control the alien. She basically shoots the alien and takes the device, and then wants to demonstrate it to Bellero Senior. She turns it on. The shield's turned on, and she encourages both her husband and his father to sort of shoot at her with both a gun and a laser, and nothing can get through the shield. But then she realises she can't deactivate it, and she's running out of oxygen. So there's a moment of panic. So they don't know what to do. The alien's been taken down into the cellar for now, and essentially they realise they need to do something. And essentially, the housekeeper woman, Mrs. Dame, starts to go down the cellar with Bellero Senior, but she kind of attacks him. She knocks out. There's also some intimation. She mentions she's killed her own pig of a husband at some point in the past. So she's a fairly aggressive woman who's got a very contemptuous attitude towards men generally, I believe. That's the kind of vibe we're talking about. And essentially, Bellero Senior falls down the stairs onto the alien, but the alien is still alive, and it's at this point they manage to get it up the stairs and figure out how to turn off the shield. The shield is somewhat powered by its blood, or its inner liquids, shall we say, which means that Judith couldn't really carry on using the device as is because it's kind of tied up to his blood. And I mean, the alien is still kind of naive and not understanding it's been betrayed. And it's kind of an interesting take on it. And it's quite a good creature design. It has to be said. It's got this kind of weird sort of structure around its cheekbones and eyes and forehead. But otherwise humanoid, really. And it's got this weird glowing light, which apparently was quite technically difficult to figure out. They had to put Vaseline on the lens and cast certain lights on it to get that effect. And it looks pretty damn good, it has to be said. It looks post-production effect, though, to be honest, not an in-camera one. So it's kind of interesting that they did it in camera. And it disappears. But we find out, essentially, that Judith has gone insane and insists she's still in the box. And, in fact, at one point she raises her hand and we see a spot of the alien's blood right in the middle of her palm. So, this is Lady Macbeth, straight on the nose, out damn spot and all that sort of thing. She has gone insane. Now, the style of the script is kind of quite melodramatic. This isn't sort of naturalistic in any way. This is they're going kind of Shakespearean, and that follows through in the dialogue. There's some great lines. For example, Bellero Senior, when he finds out what's happened, and I found out his wife, Judith, has kind of possibly killed this alien, and she kind of threatens him with sort of saying, when you find out what I've done, it will reflect on your son, won't it? And he says, great men are forgiven their murderous wives, is a line he comes up with. It's kind of fun, for one thing. Essentially, though, it does end up with Judith in a state of madness, much like Lady Macbeth. And the opening dialogue and the closing dialogue are musing on the nature of aspiration and how it can become poisonous. Ambition can be a negative thing, and it's kind of a cool episode. I really like this one. I think it was a really solid cast, and it was basically Martin Landau, Sally Kellerman, Neil Hamilton. The lady playing Mrs. Dane is called Chita Rivera, and apparently she was first considered for the role of Judith, and she wanted it, but it didn't quite work out. And I think that was for the good. I think Sally Kellerman did a great job, and Chita Rivera was very good as Mrs. Dame. And then finally the alien too. So there was a five-hander really in this one. Yeah, and I really enjoyed it. It first aired on February the 10th, 1964, and it's a big recommend for me. This is a very good one. It's not as good as, say, The Man Who Never Was, I don't think. I mean, that was exceptionally good. But it was very good. It's also kind of gone down in UFO lore somewhat, because apparently this episode was aired 10 days before the famous Betty and Barney Hill abduction case, and it's been noted that the description of the aliens Barney gives looks very much like this alien, and there's a lot of speculation that he saw this episode and somehow that subconsciously sort of influenced his memories on the matter. Researchers have asked Betty about the Outer Limits, who said she'd never even heard of it, so I'm not sure. It just does sound, from the sketch and the descriptions Barney gave, it does kind of sound exactly like this alien. So in some respects, this episode is considered maybe the progenitor of the Little Grey Men, and stuff like that. So it's a stretch, but there is that. I just thought I'd mention it really. So solid cast, solid story. Shakespearean and melodramatic, but really good watch nonetheless. So I think I'll wind up there. But before I go, may I ask, is anybody out there?
We're not.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to